And welcome to another episode of Locked On NHL, the Thursday edition, the edition where we talk about rankings every week. This week, we're continuing our division ranking list. Usually, we go through all 32 teams, 1 to 32. And in the last couple of weeks, we are doing by division, breaking things down a little bit even more. Chris is out this week. He has abandoned me. He said, Adam, I have a personal life. I am going to use that. But no need to fear. I got Armando Velez from Locked On Panthers with me. And Armando, we are starting off with our favorite division. Our favorite division. We love this division. I specifically said it on my show, Locked On NHL, the other day, that I was actually looking very much forward to this show because you and I are probably going to try and take up at least 30 minutes to talk about the Atlantic Division. But don't worry for all of you out there. We also got the all the other three divisions. We'll talk about those as well. But first, I'm going to thank everybody for making us your first listen of the day. Go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel on Locked On NHL and all the NHL channels on YouTube, as well as all the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team, if you want to listen to news on the daily on your team, well, we got a team, we got a podcast for you. So, first of all, Armando, thanks for coming back on. Like you said, I was trying to figure out when was the last time we recorded. I thought it was a lot sooner than free agency, but no, it was the summer, right?
Yeah, it was the first day of free agency, and then shortly after Johnny Gaudreau signed with the Columbus Blue Jackets, that news came out, and when we were talking about Johnny
Yes.
Gaudreau, it was a little outdated by the
Yes,
time it was
I do
released.
remember that. I do
So
remember that. And now that you brought up the Gaudreau, yeah, I literally remember we stopped recording, and the news broke that he signed, and everything that we said, all our great predictions, pretty much went down the toilet. But at least we don't have to make that many predictions this time around. So I'm going to pop on the rankings right now, so everybody could get a look. If you're watching us on YouTube, you got them right on for you on the screen. If you're listening to us on an audio platform, we got pretty much, I wouldn't say that the same rankings. I mean, there's a little movement here and there, mostly in the Pacific Division, but we're starting out the Atlantic. And, you know, I think we're going to be a little bit more biased this time around, just because, obviously both our teams play in this division. Now, Armando, looking at the Atlantic Division, looking at the movement of where the teams have been since last week, do you agree or disagree with? And now I'd just like to preface that by also saying that these are all voted on by all the hosts, except yours truly. I have never voted on because I feel like I would actually vote the Lightning further down the list every single week. But where do you agree with these rankings? Are you surprised by some of the teams, especially in the Atlantic Division where they're slated right now?
Boston number one is definitely not a surprise due to the start that they've had. I mean, with Florida and Tampa, especially now that the Florida Panthers have know now what it takes to win around. The regular season for me personally, the way I view it is so much different than I've ever viewed it with of course them breaking the 26-year drought of winning a playoff series. So the Panthers are kind of taking the same approach as the Lightning, and these two teams are awfully similar in how they're approaching the regular season. So of course, we're not even at our first benchmark yet of the NHL season, American Thanksgiving. That's like a week away. So there's still not at that point of separation yet, as far as who's going to be in, who is looking to be on the outside looking in, and also honestly between Toronto, Florida, and Tampa Bay, you could really flip any of those three, and there wouldn't really be a lot of argument on who would be above. So Florida now moving up one spot. It's right about where I expected them to be. I mean, when they were ranked fifth last week, they were just coming off a West Coast trip where they lost to Arizona and San Jose all in that trip. But now you look at the Montreal Canadiens; they've won 3 out of their last 4 as well. I mean, Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki have 10 goals each, and former Panther Sam Montembeault in his 5 starts, 238 GAA and a 930 save percentage. So even without Carey Price, the Montreal Canadiens are finding ways to win.
Yeah, they've definitely surprised me. And for those listening at home, this goes from one down. So Boston is in first place, or first in our rankings actually, and then it goes Toronto, Tampa. Those teams stay where they were last week, and then The Panthers rose up from fifth into fourth. We got the Canadians in sixth. Fifth, excuse me, fifth from seventh. And then goes Detroit, moving down from fourth place last week, and then Buffalo, and then Ottawa. So yeah, I agree with you. And this is the thing I was talking about, excuse me, on my show, is that really, are we, at least I am, but I feel like still at this point in the season, and I'm surprised yet not surprised, and this might be due to the vast number of veterans on this Bruins team, but are we surprised or not surprised by the performance we've seen from Boston thus far? I mean, I was never really a believer in this team going to the season, just because I believe they were missing Marchand. I believe Bergeron was going to be out for a quite period of time. Taylor Hall hasn't really been what he was in the past in New Jersey and Edmonton. And I guess his couple of months in Arizona, if you want to call that a stunt. But are we still? Is there still a lot more room to be shocked? Because if I remember correctly, during the summer, even when you were on the show, I think we spoke at one point that this team was supposed to head for a down season, and a large part of it had to do with me seeing what they had in goal. I mean, obviously Tuukka Rask wasn't really what he was in recent years, but you go from that to Jeremy Swayman, who is now missing time as well. So you got Linus Ullmark in that, and then kind of, I guess, a little bit of a merry-go-round of goaltenders here and there. Are we allowed to be shocked, or should we give the Bruins more respect at this point?
I think that we should give the Boston Bruins a little bit more respect. I mean, I did have Jack Bond from Paramount Sports on Locked On Panthers just in the preseason, the day before the Hurricane Ian hit Florida. So I had him on the show talking about which are the over-unders to avoid. And I was asking him, is the 96.5 over-under for the Boston Bruins one to avoid? And he said, yes, that is definitely one to avoid. Yeah, there's a coaching change. Bruce Cassidy's not there anymore. Now insert Jim Montgomery, even though his stint with the Dallas Stars didn't end so well due to some personal reasons. But Krejci's back.
Yeah,
Both Marchand and Charlie McAvoy. As far as injuries, I mean, as far as coaches and their obligation to tell when it comes to injuries to the media, they don't owe us anything when it comes to that. So they kind of went in another direction when it came to disclosing injuries. And of course they came back sooner than we all knew. And Jeremy Swayman, I believe he just got activated back to the Boston Bruins. I think I saw something like that this morning. So really a good situation for the Boston Bruins to find themselves in, as this kind of feels like a very last dance kind of approach for the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, I kind of figured though. I kind of figured though, going into the offseason, with Boston, then we'll move on into the to the Metropolitan, another dogfighted division there. But I kind of feel like with Boston, it was more so kind of all dependent on what Bergeron was going to do. Because remember that little brief period in the offseason, we didn't know if Patrice was coming back, and then he came back, and then the talk about Krejci coming back was kind of always there, but you never really knew if he still was going to come back. And then I think really what the big factor was getting Bergeron back, and I think that just injected a whole little bit, I guess, more enthusiasm into this team heading into the season. Because I think if you take him out of that, you lose one of the best centermen in the league, which is still crazy to think about at this point in his career. That the fact, and I really thought personally that this was going to be Anthony Cirelli's year to get the Selke, but insert Patrice Bergeron back into the league. But you get Krejci back. Obviously, you're getting Marchand back from injury, and that just kind of revitalizes this old group of guys. I mean, you also have your good number of young players, but yeah, I mean, I kind of look at our teams as be like, what needs to happen with this Boston team, because they're always reliable in this division. Just when you think you're starting to kind of jump into the conversation of starting to dominate the the division, because Armando, it seems like forever ago, but heading into the bubble, Boston, I believe they didn't only win the division, but they won the President's Trophy. So it's not that too far long ago that they were the top dogs of this division, and look where they are again now, making it look even easier to in the division. So you know what, we can't win. Hopefully, all we got to do is rely and playoff teams in the Atlantic as well too. They just got to rely on getting into the playoffs, and hopefully they can knock off the Bruins that way. But yeah, very impressive play from teams in this division overall. I would like to see, and we'll save this for the end, who we would like to see raise. But I had to throw it out there because they were one of my favorites, the Red Wings. Very disappointed in how they've dropped, and I would like to see them pick it up in a way where it doesn't overly affect Tampa. So moving on to the Metropolitan Division, we got the Devils in first, the Islanders second, Carolina, the Rangers, the Flyers, Capitals, Penguins, and Blue Jackets. Now, the only movement there is that Carolina and the Islanders switch places from last week, swapping from 3 and 2. I think, going from, all right, let's put some respect on the Bruins, kind of sidestepping into the Devils. Can we be surprised about this team, Armando? Another team that has, I think, even more outperformed expectations heading into this season. Can we be surprised? I think not shocked, but can we be surprised by what the Devils have done and how they've are still at the top of that division, not only in that division, but also in our rankings?
So I'm going to say something that's a little bit of inside, not necessarily a joke, but an inside saying for the Locked On NHL host. So the Devils. So the Devils have won 10 straight now, and they're getting contributions from Jesper Bratt, who is betting on himself, who's going to get quite a payday come this offseason.
Yeah.
I mean, your boy Andre Palat, who signed with the Devils this offseason, isn't even playing much. I mean, Mackenzie Blackwood is not playing neither for the New Jersey Devils as well. And they're getting great play from Vitek Vanacek as well. A guy who I saw him firsthand last year in round 1 against the Washington Capitals. I mean, he only played 5 periods. He was pulled in the third period, didn't play the rest of the series. Samsonov played the rest of that and seemed to maybe have revived his career a little bit. I'm not saying he's the goalie of the future for the New Jersey Devils, but what was the conversation for the New Jersey Devils this whole offseason? Can they buy a save? Because Jack Hughes is scoring, Nico Heischer's scoring as well, and two number 1 overall picks. But can they get the goaltending? And so far, Vitek Vanacek, I mean, he's definitely come in and he's definitely shown that he can be reliable in starting. And even Akira Schmid in 2 starts, 163 GAN and 920 save percentage. So they're getting the saves.
Yeah, that was the big thing for this team last year. I living in the New York area and not being able to afford Ranger tickets because, those tickets are like $1 million. Whenever the Lightning come to New York, I would always go to the Devils games. And so I got to watch the Devils quite a bit. And, I always said to myself on those games, they were always in the thick of those games. Even last year, I believe one of the most egregious cases was when your guys rolled into the Devils home building. I think it was like a 5-0 game for the Devils at that point, and Florida came all the way back and won that game in overtime. So yeah, really what it came down to is can this team just buy a save? Because that's really what it came down to, is that they have the talent in their skaters, they have the talent for the most part on their defensive core, and they just weren't able to stop the puck. So really that was the issue, and you're starting to see a shift now. This team is starting to make saves. They're starting to make plays in front of their goaltender, which it does help when your goaltender is able to come up with some big saves. So yeah, definitely the tides are changing in Jersey right now. I don't think that we're close to a conversation of comparing them in terms of success just yet, or getting close to success of those early Devils teams and late 90s, early 2000, late 90s teams. But the team that's really shocked me, and it's kind of cool that this week I get to have you on, because we get a little bit of refreshment, because Chris and I talk about this all the time, but so I would love to get your perspective. The Penguins, how surprised? What I don't even know where to start because you always kind of figure this is the team that's always going to be in that top three, always going to be in play. You're always what we said about Boston before is what we usually say about Pittsburgh, and it's scary how bad they're playing over the last couple of weeks. And you have Sid and Malkin at the end of their careers. I mean, granted, Sid's playing well this year, but what does Pittsburgh need to do to turn it around? I mean, yeah, like you said, the first benchmark of the NHL season is next week, and American Thanksgiving, and not too far after that. In my opinion, I think the final benchmark, New Year's. What can the Penguins do to at least get things going heading into the New Year's?
I mean, just pulling up their hockey reference page. I mean, Tristan Jarry. I mean, 355 GAA as well. So that's. I mean, and Tristan Jarry had a bounce back season last year after a horrible postseason in 2021. So it's just really about the defense core. I mean, the Pittsburgh Penguins, of course, they trade Mike Matheson to the Montreal Canadiens for Jeff Petrie as well. So that doesn't seem something that has worked out for them. And I mean, honestly, as far as the Penguins, I mean, we knew when all those three guys were extended that even Hunter Hodes of Locked On Penguins talked about the rebuilds for the Pittsburgh Penguin is going to come someday for them. Signing all three of these guys is just gonna accelerate these guys together for a long time, and then just delay the rebuild for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But it's just that's kind of like the situation that that they find themselves in. It's really similar to the Washington Capitals as well.
Yeah.
Two aging teams who have won cups.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a little bit more. You get Letang, Malkin, and Sid back, and I think that's a little bit different than extending some guys like John Carlson and obviously Ovi, who's chasing history. I mean, I think that the Capitals have been due for a rebuild for quite some time. I was saying that they were due for a rebuild. I think a couple like right around after they won the cup. So it's so weird how the game of hockey works, where your loyalties to a core group of players really kind of puts the movement or just halts the wheels on the movement of rebuilding. And so, hopefully we could see some good hockey from the Pittsburgh Penguins going forward. I think it would be a very strange postseason to not have Pittsburgh and Sidney Crosby in the mix. So, comment below, everybody. Let us know what you think. What are your biggest surprises from the Atlantic and the Metro? I mean, I feel like we're almost in bizarro land early on in the NHL season, and I feel like at this point, even during the early benchmark with Thanksgiving right next week, I think that maybe some teams are going to start selling, which is crazy to think about. Only in November. So we'll see how the season plays out for those teams. Coming up, we'll be discussing the Pacific Division as well as the Central. A lot of interesting things going on there. But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline.net. Now, BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball, soccer, esports, and most importantly, hockey. We've got it all at betonline.net. Now, if you love sports podcasts, you can find those as well as BetOnline. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your sports betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And once again, I want to thank everybody for making us your first listener of the day. Go ahead and follow me and Armando on social media. Armando's at MondoMan12. I'm at Danky Dank, DENKYD8NK. Go ahead and follow our shows and our bios. We have all that information there as well. Armando, we're looking at the Western Conference now, which very strange things happening as well. I mean, I said this from the beginning, and maybe this was a team. Maybe Chris and I, we wished it into existence. But Chris and I we weren't really expecting much from this team heading into the season. But look where they are. The Winnipeg Jets, man, in the Central, hanging in there. I kind of figured, though, after, a season removed, now just for for our listeners at home that are listening and not able to look at the graphic. So we got Dallas in first, Winnipeg and Colorado switch places at 2 and 3. We got Minnesota in fourth, Chicago in fifth, Nashville in sixth, and then Arizona in seventh, and then the St. Louis Blues in eighth. Who would have thought that there was going to be a team even lower than the Arizona Coyotes? But with the Winnipeg Jets, man, I mean, a season removed from getting rid of Patrick Laine and losing Paul Maurice, which I thought was even a bigger deal than that. Um, Other than Winnipeg in general, what are your thoughts, feelings, and concerns possibly about this division, these rankings thus far?
I mean, crazy what a coaching change can do, and I mean
Right?
the Florida Panthers. I mean, they have the former Jets coach there,
Yeah.
and we're seeing a different style of play as the Florida Panthers are going away from that run and gun style. But going back to the Winnipeg Jets, Connor Hellebuck is looking like his Vezina self, that's for sure. And Jason Robertson. I mean, we've talked about possible Hart candidates. Maybe Jason Robertson could be possibly in the Hart candidate. 26 points in 16 games, I believe that I saw just now, and he is leading the way. I mean, there was a contract dispute for Jason Robertson and the Dallas Stars in this offseason. So and he could possibly make more some more dough this coming in his next contract. So I'm a real big fan of Robo. Crazy to think that he wasn't on that Stanley Cup final team for Dallas, and and they got such a. I think it's safe to call Jason Robertson an elite goal scorer, because he's definitely showing that. To be exact, 25 points in 16 games for Jason Robertson as well. So he's definitely helping them out. That, of course, Joe Pavelski seems like a guy who just doesn't age. 37 years old, signed a 1-year extension last season, just proving himself that he could still play in his late 30s.
Yeah.
And Chicago, I watched St. Louis Chicago last night, and despite it's strange them being at number 5, and of course the start that they're having, when we all know the writing on the wall of what's going to happen come the trade deadline. I mean, Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews are likely going to be shipped out, and Andreas Athanasiou, 2 goals last night, including a really filthy move on Jordan Binnington. He could possibly bring a big return for Kyle Davidson and bring some assets this coming off season.
Yeah, we were talking before we hit the record button, Armando, that it just that was just a weird game to watch where St. Louis wasn't the better team. It's you're playing, and to add on to your point with Chicago, yeah, I mean, this is a team that we really thought they weren't going to be able to do much of anything this year. You kind of just figured they were going to mail it in because they kind of knew that the clock was ticking, and maybe that it had the reverse effect on this team. Maybe they realized that, okay, you know what, we don't have much time together anyway. Let's go out there and at least play our butts off and see what we could do with it. And I don't think it's going to come down to a situation where they're going to force the front office to keep this team together. I would be shocked if we're heading into the trade deadline and they make, they don't get rid of at least one of the two of Taves and Kane. But yeah, going back to Dallas, I mean, Jason Robertson, I had the misfortune of the Lightning running into him in the Dallas Stars the other night, and he really is an impressive player. He's one of those players that every year, we talk about the young guys that come up when they're 19, 20 years old, and they say, hey, this kid's going to be a player. And it feels like we've been saying that for quite some time. I remember during the bubble, they were talking about Jason Robertson when the Lightning played the Stars in the Stanley Cup final. And you're starting to see that. And you didn't even mention Jake Oettinger in that conversation. I think top 5 goalie already after that run that he's had in the playoffs. And now you see what he's doing this year. He missed a couple of games due to injury, but he's back and he looked like there was no rust. And really, man, it's so strange to see how things could change in a matter of really months. And Colorado's doing good things. That's all I have to say. I hope Chris hears that and is clenching his fist right now as at how lackadaisical I am about that. But yeah, the rest of this division, I mean, don't sleep on Nashville, don't sleep on the Blackhawks. Minnesota, they're just a team for me that I just feel like they still haven't shown us everything. I feel like there's always this hype with the Wild that, okay, this is the year that they're gonna finally take that next step, and they never ever do. And it's just they could win the division, and I still wouldn't believe that they're gonna go anywhere farther than a first round. I think they're there. I think it's safe to say, Armando, that maybe the Minnesota Wild, and maybe I'm being a little harsh here, and Wild fans comment below. Let me know. Don't take it out on Armando, please. Is the Minnesota Wild the Toronto Maple Leafs of the West?
I mean, I wouldn't say exactly that because they don't have the same amount of attention. Yeah, they're
Right.
in the
Yeah.
state of hockey, so I kind of get why you're going in that direction. But I mean, high powered offense in Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Zuccarello as well. Matthew Boldy is a promising player for them as well. But let's talk about how when they brought in Marc-Andre Fleury about that whole situation with him and Cam Talbot. Cam Talbot ended up being traded to the Ottawa Senators. Missed a
Yeah.
little bit of time, but Cam Talbot is back for Ottawa. And when Marc-Andre Fleury, of course, he's an older guy, performs well. What's your backup plan for that now? I mean, of course, it was a lose-lose situation that it was going to create something bad in the locker room if you kept Talbot around. So they kind of had their hands tied. And let's not forget their trade of Kevin Fiala to the LA Kings. I mean, that's a big loss for them. He was over a
Yeah.
point per game player for the Minnesota Wild as well. And I've talked a lot about on my show about the Florida Panthers being in cap hell, but there's no team in cap hell as bad as the Minnesota Wild. Maybe Vegas, you could argue Vegas, but Minnesota
Yeah.
with their buyouts of Ryan Suter and Zach Parise, they're in a tough spot.
Yeah, that it's a weird situation. I was talking to someone about this the other night where I think it's even a worse situation. Some people feel like if you're up against the wall and you don't win anything, you don't do anything less than a cup, it's kind of like hockey hell for you. But I think if you're kind of like not even in the conversation for getting to the conference final, let alone getting into the second round every year, and you're basically treading water in the cap space. I mean, I think that as a fan, at least, that is just a nightmare and just ongoing. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. That's how I look at it. But yeah, I mean, it's. I think that it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I mean, I don't know. They're going to have some sort of, I guess, sell off here or something. But really, before we get into the Pacific, I want to get your opinion. The Blues, obviously, bottom of the league, and a team not too far. Another team that's really not too far removed. You have some good talent on there, not too far removed from winning a championship all those years ago. Made an interesting move in the offseason to move away from Ville Husso, sticking with Jordan Bennington, who has been a lightning rod for controversy over the last couple of years. Which, if I was the GM, I would have switched that. I would have switched out Bennington for Husso. Maybe that's just me being a little biased there. But if you're the GM of the St. Louis Blues, how long until you pull the pin on the grenade and just blow up this team?
I think when it comes to Bennington, I think because of the long-term commitment that they have for him was going to be a little harder for them to get rid of
Yeah.
him versus Ville Husso. And listen, they traded Ville Husso's UFA rights, so they kind of knew that there was a chance to lose him anyway, and to try to facilitate a trade right before free agency open, it was always going to be a hard situation for the St. Louis Blues to bring Ville Husso back, and of course the Blues wanted to reward Bennington for winning them a cup, but man, it's just post Stanley Cup Jordan Bennington, man, it's just been a wild ride for them. And also he's not getting done any favors too. They're not scoring any goals. I mean, goals for in the NHL, they're 29th in the league in goals for. So they're not really getting any contributions there on the goal scoring. And of course, we've known about the drama between Vladimir Tarasenko and the front office about his health as well. I mean, they extend Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas this offseason. So it's just they're having a hard time getting on the scoreboard as well. It's not just Jordan Binnington.
Yeah, I mean it's a team effort out there, of course. I mean, a lot of people like to jump on the goalie as the issue when a team is the goal differential is looking crazy. But it's also about we know very well, both of us, that it's also about what's going on in front of you. I'm going to end it by saying, if I'm Torrey Krug, I'm kind of scratching my head like, what did I sign myself up for
Yeah.
here with that long-term contract? So moving on to the Pacific Division. Now, Armando, I would like to preface this by saying that here on the rankings edition on Thursdays, because of Chris's feelings about Vegas and me kind of just loving to flame the fire that is his hatred for the Vegas Golden Knights, we'd love to make fun of Vegas, but we can't make fun of Vegas this week. 26 points, first in the Pacific Division, and that leaves them at the top of our rankings, at least in the Pacific as well. So Vegas stays first. The Kings move up from fourth place. The Kraken move down from second. The Oilers are bumped down to the fourth spot from third. Calgary stays put. San Jose is bumped up from the eighth spot. And then we got Vancouver and Anaheim falling to seventh and eighth. So, I feel like after Calgary, it gets a little rough in this division, man. I mean, I would say biggest surprise, and I think we could all agree, whether you're listening, watching, or even a host on this show, Seattle really, really got it together really quickly there. I was a big hater of Seattle last year because of the way they drafted in the expansion draft. And now obviously teams are a little wiser to the way an expansion draft works and how things go because of what happened with Vegas and their immediate success. So, it was, the good thing with Seattle was that the only way to go from where they were last year was up. So what has impressed you thus far about Seattle? Because I think definitely there is, for me at least, I think the one thing that stuck out to me in probably the couple of handful of games that I've seen them is that they're playing as a team. And I think sometimes that's all it really takes in this league is if you play as a team, I mean, you're going to make a significant difference. What have you seen, Armando?
I'm seeing that a lot of their contribution, their goal scoring is very, very, very spread out. I mean,
Yeah.
Jaden Schwartz, Matty Beniers, and Jared McCann, former Panther Jared McCann, all three of them have 5 goals each, and they're doing all this despite all the drama behind their 4th overall pick in Shane Wright about all the healthy scratches. Is he going to be sent back to Kingston as well? And they're doing all that despite all that drama about him slipping in the draft and everything. So really, really impressive. And of course they're a top 10 power play unit in the NHL as well. So that they're getting those contributions, and they're doing it without the 2 goalies that originally signed with the team, and Philip Grubauer and Chris Drieger. I mean, Martin Jones, bought out by the San Jose Sharks before signing a 1-year deal with Philly last year. And I mean, not the best numbers for Martin Jones, but he's doing enough to help them win.
Yeah, and that's all it really takes. I mean, that kind of goes back to our conversation with St. Louis, is that with a goaltender, he doesn't have to go out there and be a Vezina Trophy candidate. He just has to go out there and have a 900 save percentage and just let your team do the rest of the work in front of you. And I mean, we've spoken about this as well as on our own shows, especially when we do crossovers with our respective goaltenders, is that, as long as you don't let the opposing team get into the dirty areas, I mean, you're really setting up your goaltender to go out there and just get into the flow of the game. And we've seen this with Seattle thus far. Right now, their goal differential is +7. They're 6-3-1 over their last 10. The thing that really sticks out to me, and I want everybody to keep an eye on this. Now, I don't know what their overall record on the road is, but well, actually, I am looking at it, so I do know. But 5-1-1 on the road. that's going to be interesting going forward over the course of the season because, I would imagine in my infinite hockey wisdom that their record is going to get better at home. Obviously, nothing like a little home cooking. But if they could keep that same energy on the road, I mean, Armando, the possibilities are endless with where Seattle could potentially finish in the league. Now they're 11th overall with 19 points, I guess top 10. So, tied with your Panthers and the Winnipeg Jets and my Tampa Bay Lightning and the New York Rangers. So, but you keep up that same energy and heading into, I would say, maybe mid-January, late January, early February, if you could keep that rolling into there, and you're going to start to see some teams fall off as we do around this time of year all the time. Armando, we're talking about Seattle possibly being top 5 in the league already. I mean, that I never thought those words would even come into existence in my brain at this point in year 2 for Seattle. But I mean, I don't think you could really ignore that record on the road. I mean, what does that mean to you? Do you think I'm blowing this out of proportion? Do you think I'm playing too much into it right now? Am I falling into the expansion team trap right now, or do I have every right to be excited about this?
I think you could have a little bit of both, but I think that the Seattle Kraken are gonna there's a possibility for them to fall off as they're still like a younger team. Dave Hextall is still trying to find a way to fit everything with his new guys. And I was very critical of the Seattle Kraken, not mostly during the expansion draft, but with all the assets that they had in the NHL entry draft, that they didn't make a big splash to make a big time trade to acquire a superstar with all that draft capital that they had at their disposal, especially a lot of second round picks. From what I saw, I think they had 5, if I'm not mistaken, or so.
Yeah.
So they had quite a few picks that they could have used to trade for someone, but it's a good start for them. I don't know if this is sustainable for them, but definitely that 5-1-1 road record is something very notable. I mean, another team I want to talk about here is the Calgary Flames. I mean, of course, my team and the Calgary Flames are very connected for at least the next 8 years based on a big trade of Matthew Tkachuk and Jonathan Huberdeau. Huberdeau being downgraded to line number 3. Daryl Sutter being brutally honest about saying that he's just not playing well, so he had to make a fix in it. And of course, what happens? Huberdeau scores a goal against the LA Kings on Monday, so lighting up a fire under him a little bit. And that was the team that was going from possibly no window to short window as they lose Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk. So it's not a surprise where the Flames are, because they're still trying to figure out who they are as so many different players from the outside coming in to
Yeah.
fit in with this coach who's like no nonsense. It's crazy. And funny enough, the Calgary Flames are visiting Sunrise, Florida on Saturday as Huberdeau returns to Sunrise.
Yeah, they'll be at Amalie tonight as we're recording this episode. So I'll let you know how that goes. I was saying on my show that, you know, you're saying how they're still trying to figure things out, but they're in a good position because they have Jacob Markstrom, who
Mm-hmm.
was probably one of the best goaltenders in the league last year. Now he obviously lost it in the playoffs, but if Markstrom could continue this role he's been on over the last year, I guess if you want to call it that, I mean, this team, they could take all the time they want in the world to try and get it together. So, they're a fun team to watch now that they got Huberdeau and Tippett as well. So, and obviously that enthusiastic life of the party coach that they have in Daryl Sutter. So, we'll see how things pan out for them. And but it's no easy task for for Calgary, because they got Edmonton right in front of them. Connor McDavid just having one of the greatest seasons that I've ever seen, or at least one of the greatest starts to an NHL season I have ever seen, at least in my life.
Mm-hmm.
How many different ways can we say that this guy is great at this point? The fact that he is single handedly going out there and winning games for this team now. I mean, do we just call them the Edmonton Connor McDavids at this point and just rank them basically from week to week on how he's playing and not how the overall record of the team is? I mean, do we have to look at the team and say, listen, this production from McDavid isn't going to be sustainable over the course of an 82 game season? Other guys other than Leon Draisaitl are going to have to chip in. And now that you lose Evander Kane for 3 to 4 months with that scary injury he had, um, what's next for Edmonton? Do they fall after this? I mean, yeah, Evander Kane's not exactly, you know, the lifeblood of that team, but I'm sure he was. I mean, they loved him there last year, and that's why they brought him back in the offseason. I mean, where does Edmonton go from here? Can they continue their success? Can they keep up with the rest of the division, and be able to, you know, make some ground on Seattle as well as Vegas?
They possibly could. Of course, it all comes down to Jack Campbell as well. Looks Stuart Skinner had 2 straight starts for the Edmonton Oilers. Saw Stuart Skinner goalie the Florida Panthers. If you saw all the expected goals and all those metrics, you saw that the Panthers' expected goals were like way higher than Edmonton's on their Saturday matchup. But Stuart Skinner, maybe he could be the number 1 guy taking over for the Edmonton Oilers. Who knows? And really, Brett Holden of Locked On Oilers talked about in the national show on Tuesday about what are they going to get out of Jesse Puljujarvi. He's even playing in the top 6, and he's still not getting really a whole bunch of point production as well. So
Yeah.
they decided to bring him back instead of trade him when he was an RFA this offseason. So
Yeah.
something's got to give with Jesse Puljujarvi in getting something out of him, and so that there isn't as much on Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. I mean, Zach Hyman is great at secondary scoring as well, but Puljujarvi's a number 4 overall pick. I mean, you got to get something out of him.
Yeah, I absolutely agree about that. So we'll have to see how this team, and that's the case with every team, whether it be in the Eastern Conference or in the Western Conference. You know, teams are always. I feel like we could just always equate every team to stocks in the stock market. You know, is their stock up now? I think the Edmonton stock is, I guess. I don't know. I guess it's just stagnant. It's not really going anywhere right now. I mean, I think it's going to depend on what the rest of the division does at that point. So we'll wait and see, and make sure to go ahead and comment below. Let us know what you think about all these rankings. Is there some teams that we missed? Is there some teams that didn't get enough justice? Let us know. So next week when Chris is back from his extravagant week off, we could definitely answer those questions as well. So real quick before we wrap things up, Armando, give me your top 3 risers, teams that you think are going to make an improvement, or at least, you know, teams that are going to move up on the board. Doesn't have to be any particular division. You could just pick one team from 3 divisions, and then 3 teams that you think are going to fall off.
As far as risers, I think the Penguins are going to get it together as far as the next few weeks, because of course you never want to count out Sidney Crosby as well.
Yeah.
St. Louis is one, and this last one is one mostly as for hope reasons, because we've seen so much turmoil with the management and the team. And this one is the Vancouver Canucks. What are they going to do about Bo Horvat? Bo Horvat is scoring at will. JT Miller signed a long-term extension when there was debate on whether they should have traded him or not to get some value out of it. And of course, there's so many theories on why there was an extension of JT Miller, and there might be one of Bo Horvat because their Canadian teams are more hesitant to rebuild as they lost more revenue than U.S. teams. So Vancouver might not want to press the rebuild button too. So it's just, and of course they're still paying Travis Green as well. So I love to see Vancouver get a few wins together and fight for their coach Bruce Boudreau as well. As far as teams falling, we actually saw Carter Hart become a little bit human in the last week. I mean, it was like the first 3 or 4 weeks that Carter Hart didn't have a regulation loss, and there was a big difference between him and Felix Sandstrom whenever he would be between the pipes. So Carter Hart has been the MVP of the Philadelphia Flyers this season for them, and Nashville, not sure about them. I believe they'll be somewhere like maybe in like 4 or 5 by next week. And another team that I could see falling, the Seattle Kraken. I think this is a great start for them. I know we spoke about them earlier, but I think that's going to be a team that could possibly fall in the next few weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Nashville, they're always a team I feel like, and I'll agree with you with that. I think Nashville is always a team that you can't always just count them out. I mean, there's just something about that franchise that, ever since they had that run a couple of years back, and, they've kind of just been always in the mix, especially
Mm-hmm.
when you have Saros and net. I mean, how can you count out that team? So we'll see how those teams, pan out over the next couple of weeks. Let's see. Hope maybe they'll make some ground over the next week when the rankings come out. I'll throw the rankings on the screen right now. One last minute. So let us know. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And let me and Armando know. Once again, follow us on our social media pages, mostly on Twitter. Obviously, I'm at Danky Dank DNKY D8NK, and Armando is at Mondo Man 12. So that's been it for this episode of Locked On NHL. We'll be back next week with Chris, and have a good night, everybody.